In 1861, in the small and peaceful town of Calamba, Laguna, a child was born who would one day change the destiny of his nation. His name was José Protasio Rizal Mercado y Alonso Riolanda. From the very beginning, José stood out from other children. He possessed a quiet curiosity and a sharp mind that amazed everyone around him. At just 3 years old, he could already read and write, a rare gift that revealed his deep love for learning. His mother, Teodora Alonso, became his first teacher, patiently guiding him and filling his young mind with stories, lessons, and values that would later shape his destiny. Life in Calamba seemed peaceful, but beneath its calm surface lay the heavy shadow of Spanish colonial rule. José often watched with sadness as his fellow Filipinos were treated unjustly by the authorities. He saw farmers work tirelessly on land they did not own, and heard whispers of fear whenever someone dared to speak against the Spaniards. These sights stayed in his heart. Even as a boy, he began to question why his people were suffering and why freedom was denied to them. Yet, instead of feeling hatred, he chose to seek understanding. José believed that knowledge, truth, and education could be stronger weapons than any sword. In his young heart, a dream was born, to one day help his country rise from oppression, not through violence, but through the power of wisdom, compassion, and enlightenment. As José Rizal grew older, his thirst for knowledge could no longer be contained within the walls of his hometown. Determined to expand his mind and learn from the world, he left the Philippines to study in Europe. It was a bold and emotional journey, leaving behind his family, his homeland, and everything familiar to him. In Spain, he enrolled at the Universidad Central de Madrid, where he studied medicine, philosophy, and the arts. He worked tirelessly, often sacrificing sleep and comfort to master his subjects. But Rizal was not just a student, he was an observer of humanity. He watched how Europeans enjoyed freedom, equality, and progress, things his own people were denied. During his time abroad, Rizal met other reformists and intellectuals who shared his dream of liberation. Inspired by their courage, he began to write, pouring his thoughts, hopes, and frustrations onto paper. In 1887, he completed his first novel, Nali Mi Tanher, a powerful story that exposed the cruelty, corruption, and hypocrisy of Spanish rule in the Philippines. The book opened the eyes of many Filipinos and awakened their desire for justice. A few years later, he published El Filibusterismo, a darker sequel that reflected his growing frustration with oppression. His writings became weapons of truth, shaking the Spanish authorities and inspiring his countrymen to think, question, and hope. Far from home, Rizal had become more than a student, he had become the voice of a silent nation yearning to be free. After years of studying and writing in Europe, José Rizal made a brave decision, to return to the Philippines. Despite the danger his writings had caused him, he could not stay away from his homeland. He felt it was his duty to serve his people directly, not just through words but through action. When he arrived, the Filipinos welcomed him with deep admiration, but the Spanish authorities viewed him with suspicion. They saw his influence growing and feared the power of his ideas. Soon, he was arrested and exiled to Dapitan, a remote town in Mindanao, far from the political centers of the country. Yet, even in exile, Rizal refused to live in bitterness or despair. Instead, he turned Dapitan into a living example of what a free and educated community could be. He built a small school where he taught children science, literature, and moral values. He opened a clinic and treated the sick without asking for payment. He designed an irrigation system and helped improve the town's agriculture. Every action he took reflected his belief that true change begins with education, compassion, and self-reliance. The people of Dapitan came to love and respect him not just as a doctor or teacher, but as a friend and leader. Through his quiet strength, Rizal proved that even in isolation, one person's light could guide many. His life in Dapitan became a symbol of peaceful revolution, of fighting oppression through wisdom and kindness. As the years passed, tension in the Philippines continued to rise. The people, inspired by José Rizal's writings, began to demand change more boldly than ever before. Revolution was brewing, and though Rizal had never called for violence, the Spanish authorities blamed him for fueling the growing resistance. He was suddenly arrested and taken to Manila, accused of treason, rebellion, and sedition. Inside the cold walls of Fort Santiago, Rizal awaited trial. Despite the false accusations, he remained calm and dignified, confident in his conscience and in the truth. During his imprisonment, he continued to write, not of anger or revenge, but of love and sacrifice. It was there, in the solitude of his cell, that Rizal composed one of his greatest works, Mi Ultimo Adios, My Last Farewell. The poem was a heartfelt goodbye to his country, a message of peace, courage, and hope for future generations. He wrote of his willingness to die for his beloved Philippines and of his belief that freedom would one day bloom from his blood. The Spanish court, blind to his nobility, sentenced him to death. Yet Rizal faced his fate without fear. To his family, he sent letters of love and forgiveness. To his people, he left his ideals, that the pen is stronger than the sword, and that truth can never be silenced. In the silence of his cell, José Rizal was not defeated, he was preparing to become immortal. On the morning of December 30, 1896, the sun rose softly over Bagumbayan Field, now known as Luneta Park. The air was calm but heavy with emotion. Soldiers lined the field as José Rizal, wearing a simple black suit, walked with quiet dignity toward his place of execution. His hands were tied, but his spirit was free. Around him stood hundreds of Filipinos, some weeping, others silent, all knowing they were witnessing the death of their nation's greatest son. Rizal remained calm, his eyes filled not with fear, but with peace. He looked up at the sky, as if whispering his final prayer for his beloved country. The command was given. Shots rang out, echoing across the land. Rizal fell slowly to the ground, turning his body so he would face the rising sun, a final symbol of hope. In that moment, time seemed to stop. The Spaniards thought they had silenced a rebel, but instead, they had awakened a nation. His blood became the seed of freedom, and his words continued to live in the hearts of Filipinos everywhere. Across the islands, people began to rise with courage, carrying his dream of liberty and justice. José Rizal's death was not an end, but a beginning, the dawn of a new era for the Philippines. His life reminds the world that true heroes do not die in battle, they live on forever through the truth they spoke and the love they gave to their people.